Estate 360, the podcast. Hey, listen, I broke down subject to, I did this whole little training on subject to in the Facebook group, which I will put a link to uh, in the description. It's called the Real Estate Accelerators Group. And inside that group, I do on Sundays what's called Sunday School, which is where I just break down a lot of different things. And I share with everybody in the group, with some of my students, answer their questions, but I'm sharing with them the processes that we're doing right now, the processes that are working in the economy that we're living in right now. And so I did this training. It's about an hour and a half long, but I broke it down into three parts so it's easily digestible for the listener or the watcher, depending on where you're consuming this content. So I want to get into that. So it's going to be a three-part, right? They're about 30 minutes or so each, and you'll always be able to check them out. So it's going to be three different episodes that you'll get. But I want to give it to you so you can digest it. I don't want it to be too much. So without further ado, let's get into the training. Subject two is, if you don't know, it's a creative financing strategy, and it's an act of basically assuming a mortgage, but you're not doing it in the typical sense of assumption, right? You're taking over the property. You're taking ownership, actually. You're going to be on the deed, and we recommend that you do it in your LLC or a trust, and then the loan, of course, is still in someone else's name. Now, this is a strategy that you can implement whether you have money or not. It really doesn't matter because there's a number of different things that you can do in a subject to, right? You can wholesale subject tos. You can partner with people on subject twos. You can do them yourself. You can do subject twos with equity or with no equity, whether there's a lot of equity or there's a little bit of equity. There is literally I don't want to say an infinite number of ways that you can go, but there are a lot of ways that you can go about it. And I kind of want to go over, I want to spend some time with you. And again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat so I can get to them, because I want this to be informative, and I want you to be able to, take action. Literally take action once you get off this phone call, off this live, So let's just kind of dig right into it. Let me go over here. Let me share my screen with you a little bit. All right. So here we are. Subject two. So subject two is a strategy to acquire control of a property. And you don't need any of your own documents, right? And again, acquiring or taking control of the property means your name, your company's name rather. We would never recommend that you do these things in your personal name. That is never a good way to go. And we're going to talk about how agents fit into this and everything, because there is a tremendous opportunity for agents and for investors to work with agents through this. I didn't get into that right away, so pardon me. But let's just stick to the script here for a second. So if you once you get a deal in hand, you're going to put your business name or your trust on there. That's something that you control or your partnership controls, and it's yours. The house is yours. Your name is on the deed, and the loan is in someone else's name. And you don't need any documents to do it. So you have to, even with a hard money loan, they want to see your taxes or your bank statements. They want you to have some kind of credit. Most of them want some kind of credit. Some of them want you to have a 680. Some of them want you to have at least a 620. Some of them at certain times will even say a 580, which is fine. But the point is, you have to go through all the rigmarole, right? You've got to, a lot of times, show proof of funds to a lender. But even in this situation, sometimes you're going to have to show proof of funds. It depends on the sophistication of the seller, right? But you don't need anything, You get the deed, but the mortgage stays in the seller's name. And these are documents that you would typically need to show to a lender in order for you to get a loan. And you don't need that. Why don't you need that? Well, you're not going through a typical lending process. In essence, the current homeowner becomes your bank. Okay? And there is a bit of an education process 9 times out of 10, 9.9 times out of 10. There's a bit of an education process that goes with this. But the reason you don't need these documents is because you're not going to a traditional bank. You're not going to a commercial lender or a hard money lender. You're not doing any of that, right? You are going to this homeowner. You're identifying whatever their pain point is, because if someone's going to do this deal, there's always a pain point, right? There's always a point of pain, a point of contention that someone is going to have, and we want to know what that is, right? So it could be a distress situation, whether it's physically, financially, and I say physically to the property, physical to the property, but it could be physical to the person as well. A lot of times you work with older people, that are trying to downsize, or not even downsize, just get out of the house because they don't want to cut the grass and clean the gutters and do all the rigmarole that comes with, taking care of a house. Once you get up in age, a lot of people just don't want to do that anymore. It just literally doesn't make any sense for them. Maybe physically they just can't do it anymore. There's just a lot of different things that go with that. And then I got to throw this little caveat in there. There is, the reverse mortgages that are out there, right? And a lot of people have been asking lately, listen, can we do subject to with a reverse mortgage? Well, technically yes, but not really. The circumstances surrounding that can be a little difficult sometimes. So you gotta be careful. Really, you have to be careful, because anything can actually happen when you're dealing with the reverse mortgage lenders. They're typically very in tune to what their homeowners are doing with their property. They check on them quite regularly because they want to see if they passed, or who's there, if they're living there, if they've moved on to something else, meaning out of that particular property. They want to know. So they kind of stay on that. So utilizing those are kind of different. They're very, very different. And you should really know what you're doing if you're going to look into getting something like that, because equity plays a big, big part in that. And, you really have to know what you're doing. How much equity is there? What is there any equity there? Because every one of those loans are different. They're all different. So you have to be really, 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 really careful when you're dealing with those kind of situations, right? So, but we're not going to dig into that right now, because that kind of doesn't even make sense, because I want to keep this, I don't want to say superficial, but I want to keep it on a level where you can understand exactly what's going on, right? So in essence, a subject to is taking over a property. Your name is going to be on the deed. It's yours for all intents and purposes. And there are going to, the loan will stay in that person's name, right? So what kind of documents are going to be needed to do this? And then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, but I absolutely want to give you, the specifics of what's going on and what's absolutely needed, right? So here are the documents, and these aren't all the documents. Okay, there are other documents that are going to be involved, but they come from the lender, right? Or from your attorney or your title company. Most of those things are going to come through there. So I want to point out, how the things that you're going to need when you are speaking to that person, so you can gather all the documentation that's going to be necessary for you to find success in this particular process, right? So the first thing that we're going to be looking at is, I don't want to do that. This third-party authorization to release information. That's the first thing we're going to look at, right? There's other, I don't want to say it's the first, and there's really all of this is just one package that we present when we're having things signed, or when the agent is having things signed, because it just doesn't, it matters who's doing what. We like to kind of do those things. We don't like to relinquish a lot of that to other people for a lot of different reasons. One, we want to make sure these things are explained properly. It's extremely important that these things are explained properly and effectively to the seller, right? We don't want them to have any any questions about what they're doing. We want them to know what they're doing. There's no reason to lie. There's no reason to be deceptive. There's no reason to rush your way into an opportunity as so many people do, which is why we have a lot of issues out there. So I want to, reiterate that. So a third party authorization to release information allows you to gather information, if necessary, from the lender, from any party associated with this particular deal, right? Now, the next thing that we're going to focus on is, of course, the purchase and sale agreement. The purchase and sale agreement is important. Now, there are different PSAs, purchase and sale agreements out there, and you do want to know what you're doing. You do want to know what it says in there. It's important to know what is being said inside your purchase and sale agreement, because a basic blank purchase and sale agreement may not have everything that you're going to need to have in it. Like, you want to make sure that, this is a fully assignable contract. That should be in all your contracts anyway. It should be in all your contracts. So, there are people that have forms, or I should say purchase and sale agreements, that are specific to a subject to, and there are others that, that have these blanket ones. And I got to tell you, whatever documentation that they're using in your state, it's not really good enough. You got to have addendums to that. If you're going to be dealing with an agent, for instance, a lot of times they really want to use their state contracts, which is fine. You just have to have all the affidavits and put things in that particular contract that are going to, let everybody know, hey, this contract is fully assignable, meaning if you wanted to wholesale that thing off, you can. That's one of your exit strategies. Or if you're going to sell it to another one of your companies or a partnership, but it went under contract here, but it's going to close over here. Michael, what are you saying here? Is this about being an assigner or assignee, an assignment form? It doesn't have to be an assignment form per se. Good question. It literally just needs to be a line item on the contract that says this contract is fully assignable. That's all it really has to say. There's some other verbiage as you start to work with different kind of situations that you want in there, but we're going to keep this simple. And your attorney or title company, depending on where you are, is going to know once you talk to them and say, hey, we're doing this subject to, what do we need in our documents to be safe in this state, right? Because we know that state law is different from place to place. Can you do this everywhere? Yes, you can. Can you do it with VA loans? Yes, you can. Are there objections that are going to pop up? People saying, hey, listen, I'm trying to buy another house and I can't buy one, my lender said, until I sell this house. Can you object to that? Absolutely. You have to look at the kind of loan they have, because there are loans that specifically state how to do a subject to deal inside their documents, inside the documents that they signed when they initially bought the house. So these things are already there. It's not a matter of it being impossible to do. It's a matter of people understanding what they can do or how to do it. And sometimes that requires, the closing attorney to have a conversation with the finance company and so on and so forth. A really easy thing to overcome, but we'll talk about those things a little bit later. Okay. Now, going back, your purchase and sale agreement is an important thing to have. Obviously, you want to make sure you have that. I like to have seller disclosures, right? Defects in the property. When we go look at a property, we are always looking for some kind of physical defects. It's one of the things we do. I mean, when you're looking at a particular opportunity, there are many exit strategies, right? There's not just one. You might be looking at this property. It might have come in as a wholesale lead, but as you gather more information, you realize for one reason or another, this isn't going to work. Generally that has to do with how much money is in the deal, or rather not in the deal, how much equity is or isn't there. That will switch up how you are coming at it. Now, if you have a high equity deal, can you still do a subject to? Absolutely. There's an infinite number of ways for you to work it out. And, in terms of your exit strategy or how you put it together, you take over the loan, you can agree on a price above, of course, the loan amount, depending on the situation. And you can have a situation set up where not only are you paying that mortgage, but you're paying interest on the equity that, because technically they're your bank and they're going to be in second position, but that's the case, right? They are going to have basically a second loan if they want to get some of their interest. That's what you want to do. You want to be in control of the property. You want to be in control of where the money goes. You don't want to be sending that check to the person and hope that they pay, because they might not want to pay. They might have something that comes up in their life that you just never know. So you want to make sure you have that control. But the disclosure, the seller disclosure that points out the defects in the property is something that when we go and look at a property, we say, oh, it needs paint, or there's water damage on the bathroom floor. The general things that we do. We put that in there as part of the disclosures. Hey, these are the things that are wrong with the property. It could be termite damage. It could be any number of things, right? So we want to make sure that that's in there as well. Because again, if it's not, it really doesn't matter, because you're going to say you're taking it as is and so on and so forth. But I like to make sure those things are in there, me personally, because to me, it absolutely matters. I want everything to be disclosed. The next is acknowledgement of the due on sale clause. The due on sale clause is always there. And so this is one thing that people ask about constantly when it comes to these kinds of deals. Why is the bank going to do this? Aren't they going to exercise their due on sale clause? They could exercise their due on sale clause. It depends on the situation, right? So you're going to, the bank generally doesn't care as long as they're getting paid. They're going to stay out of the way. But you're going to acknowledge with the seller that, hey, we acknowledge that this due on sale clause does exist. And in the event that we have to go ahead and refinance it or sell it, we'll do that, right? But you want it to be disclosed. There are a number of ways that you can deal with it. But if you're making your payments, you're not going to ever have any issues, ever, right? Paul, would you suggest having a person who does home inspections to be with us to specify the property defects? You know what? That's a very good question. And yes, you can do that, right? Over time, you're going to be able to discern what's going on with the property. In the beginning, yeah, I mean, if you've got a friend and it's not going to cost you $400 to get it done, why not, right? And I'm not saying avoid doing that because of the $200, $300, $400, $500 that costs. Not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if you don't have it, it's an expense that you don't necessarily want to incur, right? Because you still got earnest money. There's a bunch of money that has to come up. Do you want it? Depends on the deal. I mean, if you're looking at a property and this thing needs a lot of work, a ton of work, hey, we look at all the foundation. We look at the roof. We look at the HVAC systems. We look at the water heater. We look at the furnaces. We look at everything, but we're looking at it with, 20 years of experience, right? Everybody doesn't have 20 years of experience to be able to look at a roof and say, hey, it looks worn, right? I mean, how do you know until you've done it? So yeah, at times it may be very important to have, and if you have someone on your team already, then that's great. That's one of the things that we talk about in the training, it's building your success team, right? And having someone like that, whether it's a contractor or an inspector, having one of those people on your team is always going to be important, especially when you're just starting out, so you know what to look at. I mean, it's really difficult if you don't know what to look at. I can sit here and talk to you till I'm blue in the face about this, the windows, the roof, the flooring, the cabinets. Some things are obvious. Some things are not so obvious. Some things are just not obvious. And I got to tell you, I don't like going underneath houses. It's not my thing, right? I don't want to do it. I'm here in Georgia, and I simply don't want to do it. We had some properties a little, west Texas, and we did some things in Arizona, and, I didn't see a lot of crawl spaces over there, right? But, you'll go into the back shed or something, and there'll be snakes in there. I'm not playing with that, man. I'm hiring the people that do that to do that. It's not my thing. I'm not going to do it. So if I need to get those things, I'm going to get them from the people that do them. But going back to where we were, the due on sale clause, It's just an acknowledgement that you know that it's there because you want to point this out to them so that you can alleviate any pressure or fear that they may have about that being exercised on their behalf, right? Or in the negative. But there's ways to do that. All right. And then the next one we have there is the affidavit of liens. Why would we want to have that in there? Because we're going to do a title search anyway. The reason that we want to have it in there is we want them to disclose all these things to us. Yes, we're going to see if there's any liens that pop up on the house or even the person for that matter when we do the title search. And regardless of what pops up, we're getting a title policy anyway, right? Because remember, any liens are going to be attached to the property. It's not attached to the loan. It's attached to the property. It's attached to the person, but they have to go then and attach it to the property, right? So if we know that there are liens in place, we can negotiate from that perspective. But we have them sign an affidavit of liens for just pure disclosure purposes. We want them to be as honest with us as we are going to be with them, period. So if they are not being honest, again, it's going to show up on the title search, and then we will deal with it from that perspective. How do you deal with that? Well, there's plenty of negotiation space for how you're going to deal with liens that pop up in people's names. It depends on how much it is. All of this comes into play. Can you overcome those objections? 1,000% yes, absolutely. But once you find yourself in that position, you're just going to start talking. You're going to talk to the lien holder. You're going to talk to the person. You're going to talk to the lender. You're going to talk to all these people based on how their loan was structured and the laws of the state. You'll decide how you're going to move forward with those liens, right? Because you can assume that property. You can still take over the property with the liens in place. You can still do that. You just have to negotiate those things away. It's as simple as that. But again, it's vitally important that that's there. All right. Affidavit of marital status. Why do we want to have an affidavit of marital status? Well, because more often than not, what happens? We get a lot of these deals from people that are, going through a divorce. They're splitting up. And we call people constantly. We're constantly talking to people. And this one person might be on the deed that or popped up in the search when we skip trace them. The other person may not have popped up in that search. It doesn't mean they're not on the deed. It just means that this is the person that popped up, and this is the person we're having a conversation with. So we now have to say, hey, what's going on with this property? And is there a husband? Is there a wife? Is there someone else who's on the deed or on the loan? Who's there, right? More importantly for us, it's a matter of the deed. But we need them to disclose who's on the deed. Again, this is something that we're going to find out once we run title, right? We'll know who's on the deed. But the more information we have as soon as possible, we can start to deal with these things. We deal with spouses all the time. And I don't have to tell you, some of these conversations can be, a little extra because we had a husband and wife that were going through a divorce, or two people, I should say, that were going through a divorce, where the husband was motivated to, save his credit and get this thing. They were going, she was willing to allow it to go into foreclosure. He'd moved out of state. She moved to another part of town, and she could care less. And she wanted to get a bunch of money that really wasn't there in terms of a down payment. And we were just not, it was unreasonable, where he wanted a very small amount of money relative to what she was asking for, and he was willing to give half of what he was asking for. He was asking for 10. He was going to keep 5 and give her 5. He felt that was fair. She wanted 20 just on her side, and there wasn't enough equity in MVM. Was way over at this point. $20,000 plus just maybe 5 for him on top of the renovations that were needed to the property. Just took it over the top because it was already, close to its equity point. So we figured something out with the help of the husband. We finally got her to the table and were able to work something out. But it took another 2 months to do that, to work that out. And that mortgage clock continues to escalate. That money is still adding up. So we needed to make sure that those things get taken care of, right? So we did that. So you want to have that in advance. It's going to help you out a great deal. It's just really important that you get as much information as possible. Notification to the lender. Now, this is something that you'll just keep for yourself. I mean, if you want to notify the lender right away, you can. There are times when you need to notify a lender, when you're negotiating maybe with them, because when you're doing these subject twos, maybe it's a pre-foreclosure and this person is behind, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, whatever the case. And you don't necessarily want to pay this, huge amount of money. It could be, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 sometimes. We've seen them pretty high, depends on the house. So we want to try to negotiate any expenses. We want to say, hey, listen, we've got 20% to put down in this particular scenario. If they owe 40,000, we have 10,000, that we can give you now. Can we work something out, kind of a forbearance kind of situation or a modification? Can we put something together to get this out of foreclosure status where we don't have to come up with the 40,000? But that's more on the negotiation side. But that notification to lender is coupled with what comes after that are the documents that are necessary for you to give to the lender so the lender can legally, lawfully have that communication with you. And what is that second document? That second document is the limited power of attorney for this real estate transaction. That is the second document that you're going to need, right? Those two things are what you would send to them. Now, the third-party authorization, a lot of times that winds up being the limited power of attorney. It depends on how you word it, right? We use them all in one, but there are other people that have them separated, right? So we use them all in one. The third-party authorization and the limited power of attorney is one document that is the acknowledgement of that person saying, hey, they have the right to do this. They have the right to have this conversation. It's got their name, their date of birth, their social security number, along with all in a limited power of attorney structure that is then, notarized and sent off to the lender. So that just lets them know that they can talk to you. And a lot of times you're going to need to have that conversation. Now, again, as I said, there are additional disclosures that are needed in various situations that, they're going to be different things for different states, really. There are disclosures that are needed in California that aren't needed in Georgia. There are things needed in, Illinois that you don't need in Arizona, and so on and so forth. But those are documents, generally speaking, that are going to be all in the closing package that your attorney and or title company puts in place for you. Okay, does that make sense? Good. All right. Any questions so far as we move on? I want to make sure that that you're getting everything you need to get, because we're gonna go now into where you're gonna find these deals, right? So that is kind of like the technical minutia, if you will, but it's important for you to know. I mean, it's vital. It's just as important for you to know that as it is for me to tell you, listen, go out and get an LLC set up right now. Go out right now and get an LLC. Why should you have an LLC? You don't want to put anything in your name, right? You can have land trust situations in place when you do each one of these deals, and you can do each one of these into separate land trusts as well. I would recommend that you speak to an attorney in your state. There are a lot of people that do land trusts. We do them for the ones that we utilize in the subject to spaces. But that is a great way. I mean, okay, so Paul has a question here. Paul says, so title and or lawyer would know these docs needed. Yes, sir. So I gave you the ones that you want to have in your package. Those are the documents that you want to have in your package that you make sure get signed. The other disclosures that are needed, and there's a ton of them that are going to be needed. I mean, some places require you to have lead-based paint, and just for a transfer of title, which, it is what it is. But, if that's something that's needed, those things are going to pop up when the attorney or title company is looking at all the documents in front of them, and they say, hey, listen, we're going to need this, or we're going to need that, and we're going to need this. Then you just go from there and you go get it. If there's an agent involved, having that disclosure, whatever the disclosure is going to be pretty simple if it's related to them. Most of them, these disclosures are basically notifications from the attorney to the seller and or buyer, or title, attorney or title company to the seller and or buyer. And those notifications are important. They're required by law in any given state. And because they're required by law, we can always count on our title companies and lawyers to make sure that they CYA in every case, right? In every case. So, but you want to know as well. So you have to get familiar with what those things are in your state. It's really, really important. Excuse me one second. So those things are important for you to know, right? So